Welcome to On the Line, the show that connects you to Vice News. This week, after the fall of Mosul, Iraq's Shia militias were called on to stop the Islamic State. Henry Langston traveled to the front lines to meet the fighters and investigate their rise to power. Now, live from Brooklyn, Henry is on the line.
Hey guys, it's Henry. I'm here to take your questions on our latest film from Iraq covering the fighting between the Shia militias and the Islamic State. So who's up first?
Hey Henry, so first we have Kaylee. Kaylee's calling in from Eugene, Oregon.
Great. Hi Kaylee.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Kaylee?
I'm good. So I have a question. So you were in Iraq in December.
Mm-hmm.
You were embedded with the Shia militias. So I just want to know what the group members were like. Like, what sort of values do they have? Like, what sort of things do they care about?
Well, first of all, there's sort of quite a mix of people, a lot of younger guys, a lot of older guys, lots of different professions. You know, some of them have had military experience, some haven't, some are students, some are sort of engineers, doctors, farmers. But there's a real sense that they are there to defend their country and defend their land from ISIS, who they see as mainly a sort of terrorist force coming to essentially destroy their country. And they're involved in, a lot of them are involved in very heavy fighting pretty much every day if they're on the front lines. But despite that kind of intense way of living, that intense violence, they have this sort of strange humor that they sort of carry with them. It's almost like a gallows humor, a way for them, I think, to deal with that kind of fighting. I think we've actually got a clip that we can show you that highlights a bit of that strange gallows humor.
Saeed, the leader of the Mujahid here, is saying it's time to basically get out of this trench. The fight has been quiet for the past 15 minutes. They're going to give basically, we're going to make a run for it.
سنتيم يبقى سنتيم على راسك وكان انت الان نخليك بكفن وبتابوت ونكتب عليك هذا احد شهداء انصار المرجعيه وندزك لاهلك.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a strange example of the way they kind of react to those sort of obviously, for me, a bit of a harrowing moment, but they sort of thought it would be quite funny that they'd give me a Muslim burial. I'm not sure how my family would have reacted to that if that had happened, but that's kind of how they deal with these situations, and it's very tough for them, but they definitely have a strong belief in what they're doing there.
So say the Islamic State no longer poses a threat. What are these militias' goals afterwards? So what happens next?
I think it varies. I ask this question a lot. A lot of them sort of want to go home, back to their lives, back to their families. Some, like I said, have never experienced a battle before, so are new to this, and they feel it's their duty to be fighting on the front lines. But ultimately, once the war is done, once ISIS is finished, they want to return to their homes and return to their families. Others who have been part of these more established militias that we saw in the middle of the noughties fighting the US occupation, and who were also involved in fighting with the sort of Sunni communities in 2006, 2007. A lot of them are saying that they want their groups to be absorbed into the Iraqi state, into the security services, which obviously for a lot of people poses quite a serious problem, quite a serious issue, that these groups who have have committed abuses in the past, have sort of separate agendas to the Iraqi state, now feel that they are owed a little bit of power once their mission is done.
Awesome. Well, those are all the questions that I have. That's certainly really, really interesting.
Oh, great. Well, thanks very much for dropping me some questions.
Thank you.
No worries. Bye. Thanks, Kaylee. Okay, so who's next?
So actually, Henry, I've got a tweet I'm going to read to you.
Okay.
This one was sent in, and if we'll pull it up on the screen, tweet says, to what extent will Iran back the Shia militias if they see the Islamic State getting the upper hand? Is a invasion by the Iranian army possible, in your opinion? What do you think about that?
I'm not sure an invasion by the Iranian army is something that would happen. I'm sure they would up their sort of support for the militias and the Iraqi government and their military. But I think an invasion is something I certainly wouldn't want to comment on. But we have seen reports of the Iranian Air Force backing up militias on the ground. So that could definitely happen again or could increase. I think that's certainly possible. So what's next?
Yeah, next actually we have a Skype video message from Hamza. So why don't you take a listen and see if you can answer his question.
Hello, Henry. My name is Hamza Haddad. I'm from Baghdad, Iraq, currently studying in Halifax, Canada. And my question to you is, did the Shia volunteers carry any Iraq flags alongside religious banners they may have had? Thank you.
Okay, well, each militia has their own flag, their own banner, sort of their own emblems. So you see a lot of those flags take prominence on the battlefield, on checkpoints, on bases that they have, on the trenches and the front lines. What we didn't see that much of, though, was sort of the Iraqi national flag, which you'd expect you would, given that they say they're fighting for their state. But we didn't see much of that. We saw more Iraqi flags with sort of the Iraqi military. But yes, certainly the militias was more the religious banners and then banners of their own groups. It sort of highlights the little bit of discrepancies in like who are they actually, what are they fighting for? Are they fighting a religious war? Are they fighting to protect their state? A lot of them would basically say both, but some worry that this is a religious war that could sort of stoke sectarian tensions, and we certainly are seeing that. What have we got up next?
Next, we have another Skype caller. Let's say hey to Humam. Humam's calling in from Philadelphia.
Hi, Henry. How's it going?
Hi, Humam. I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Great.
My question for you is, how have the local civilian populations received the Shia militias in the areas they have liberated?
It really varies. I mean, when we were out on the front lines with the militias themselves, we didn't really see that many civilians. These are areas of sort of active conflict, so most of the civilians have fled because the fighting is just too severe. No one, they can't farm their land, they can't work, they can't sort of just basically live in their homes. It's way too dangerous with sort of ISIS running around and then the militias on top of that using, a lot of firepower against each other. So we didn't see or meet many civilians there, but we did obviously then search for civilians who had been in these areas, and we went to the sort of west area of Baghdad, which is mainly Sunni, to speak to some Sunni civilians, what they think about sort of the Shia militias operating in their areas. And it was a bit of a negative reaction, as you can imagine. There have been a number of abuses against Sunni communities by these Shia militias, and for the most part, they seem to be operating in Sunni areas. They're retaking territory that ISIS have taken, and it's mainly Sunni areas north and west of Baghdad, so Anbar, Salahuddin province, Diyala, and we're hearing a lot of sort of reports of civilians being kicked out of these areas, and we saw these villages were empty, and the question, I guess, is whether these militias will then let these Sunni communities return, and we're already hearing reports of them being basically turned away from their homes once the fighting has quietened down. So it's a mix, but if you're a Sunni, I think the Shia militias are something to fear.
Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani issued a code of conduct for the Popular Mobilization Forces to abide by. Did you witness any violations in your travels?
We didn't see any sort of obvious abuse cases. Like I said, many civilians in areas we were just weren't there. We did speak with the Majahir militia group in Anbar. Yasseri, their leader, spoke about this code of conduct that was issued to them quite a lot, and he was very keen on pushing that, saying, we don't touch their crops, we leave them, we're not stealing from them, we're not using their homes to fight in, although that was untrue. They obviously were using some civilian buildings to base their weapons and their forces. But we didn't see any overt and obvious cases of these sort of abuses or these codes of conduct not being followed. But we did then see cases of militias firing into villages that may or may not have included civilians in, which obviously that's, if there are civilians there, that's a breach of the Geneva Conventions. In Diyala, we saw helicopters firing into villages. We were told by the militias on the ground that they were clear of civilians, but we obviously couldn't verify that if that was true or not. So I think there are many sort of these codes of conduct are being followed in some places, but I think when it comes to the fighting, those codes of conduct disappear a little bit quickly.
Thank you.
No worries. Thanks for calling in. Who have we got up next?
So next we have Taif, who's calling in from Washington, D.C.
Great.
Hey, Henry.
Hi, Taif.
Thanks a lot for doing this documentary. Personally, as a Baghdad native, it means a lot to me to see it, and I thought it's a great documentary. It showed great connection between these militias and the Iraqi security forces.
Yeah.
However, what I felt like the documentary did not show much is the civilian side of the story, the people who are directly affected by this conflict between these militias and ISIS.
Yeah.
So, do you think that the documentary does justice to covering the human rights issues and the humanitarian crisis in Iraq? Because definitely for me, I don't want to hand the future of my country to these militias.
Yeah. No, we definitely would have liked to have spent more time investigating that. Our main objectives were to first sort of meet these militias, see how they were fighting, see where they were fighting, how they were operating, who's backing them, and then we definitely tried to spend as much time then, once we've got that kind of access nailed down, once we've spent some time with them and got these interviews, to try and see that other side. Like I said into some previous questions, it's difficult for us to meet civilians in the sort of active combat zones, which is then why we went to West Baghdad to try and speak to some Sunni communities about how they feel about these militias operating in this area. And not only did they take issue with the militias, but they also took issue with the government and their use of barrel bombs in cities in Anbar like Fallujah and Ramadi. And I think we've actually got a clip of a chat that I had with a Sunni imam who clearly isn't happy with these militias being in those areas.
What do you think of the Shia militias' involvement in the war against the Islamic State?
أصبحت لها مساحة واسعة تماما بالصولة والجولة في القتل والنهب وسرقة أموال الناس، خصوصا بعد أحداث الموصل بفتوى من قبل المرجعية. وأنا أجري معك اللقاء الآن، هناك أناس ينحرون بالسكاكين، وهناك أناس تقتل على هوياتها هذه الساعة ومستمرة غير منقطعة. نسأل الله العفو والعافية.
So on top of speaking to the Sunni imam, we then spoke to someone from Human Rights Watch who'd been compiling a report on these militias. I mean, the militias had only been operating in this conflict directly for 6 months when we were there. So Human Rights Watch was still sort of gathering all this information about abuses and speaking to as many civilians as they can. And obviously since then, we've seen a number of other abuse cases. And also recently, so 2 weeks ago, within the last 2 weeks, sorry, this problem between the Sunnis and the Shias and these militias moving into the political spectrum. And you've got a member of the council representative being kidnapped, a Sunni member being kidnapped by the militias, his uncle being killed, and now there's a lot of infighting within the government about these new laws being passed through, the National Guard bill, which the militias are likely to feature heavily in. So, I mean, we'd definitely like to go back and do more investigation ourselves into these militias and their sort of codes of conduct. No worries. Thanks for calling in. And who have we got next?
We have another tweet for you, actually, Henry.
Okay, cool.
So we had somebody who wants to know how much U.S. weaponry you saw with the militias, and in your opinion, how much of a threat do these militias pose now that they have American weaponry?
We didn't see that sort of many American weaponry. Some fighters were carrying M16s, M4s, the sort of standard U.S. assault rifles, but those are being supplied to the Iraqi military, so I think there's a bit of trickle down. It's definitely not a direct supply route. We have heard other groups, though, being able to obtain much heavier weaponry. I think there was a couple of weeks ago, Kataib Hezbollah, another militia, was seen with a US Abrams tank. So that's a bit more severe, heavier weaponry. But for the most part, what we saw was mainly sort of your standard AK-47 assault rifles, a few American weapons thrown in. But we did see that sort of bigger organizations like Badr had a big fleet of American-made Humvees, which again were being used by the Iraqi security forces and obviously have been passed down or sold on to the militias to use. The threat they pose, I mean, it depends what happens post ISIS in Iraq, whether they sort of are fully integrated into the Iraqi military and they follow by those sort of codes of conduct and the Iraqi military has full control over them, or if that doesn't happen and they take these weapons and then you've got groups that are very well trained in modern warfare with modern weaponry, or just the weaponry that they have anyway, American or not, if they don't become part of the Iraqi military, then they obviously pose a lasting threat to the stability of the country. And I think we've got one final thing, is that right?
Yeah, actually, last thing of the day.
Great.
We made it this far. So we've got a video message that Hussein sent us on Skype, so let's take a listen.
Great.
Hello, my name is Hussein Altar. I'm from Baghdad, Iraq. I live in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Who do you think has the upper hand in the war right now? ISIS or the Shias and the Sunnis? Thank you.
That's a really hard question. When we were there, it felt like at the time there was a bit of a stalemate between sort of the Iraqi security forces and ISIS, the Islamic State. I think we're unlikely to see sort of big-scale attacks like which we saw in the summer, the fall of Mosul, but we have seen recently a number of large ISIS attacks on Kirkuk and some fighting around the edges of Mosul, and they're still able to put up a very strong fight down in Anbar as well. But I mean, I think both sides sort of have periods of momentum, but I couldn't really say if one side has the most obvious advantage right now. But what we are expecting is there to be some sort of spring offensive by the Iraqi security forces and the Kurdish Peshmerga forces in the north, so that if that's successful, we could see ISIS lose a lot of territory over the next coming months. I think that's it. Well,
yeah, Henry, you made it to the end of the show. How do you feel?
I feel good. It's great to speak to some people, hear their opinions on the film, and throw some sort of things back at them. So yeah, thanks very much, guys, for sending in your questions. It'd be great to do this again sometime. So a couple of shots just got fired. I'm not sure whether it was the ISIS fighters, certainly pretty close. The bins of mortar rounds just dotted around.
No. From this now.
That was today?
No, not today.
Wow.
Quickly out of the open ground.